Hello, this is Paul Humber, and I'm giving you this video entitled Dinosaur Disguise. Now, what do I mean by that? I'm talking about the systematic cover-up of radiocarbon dating for dinosaur bones. It is an effort to expose, as the title says, dinosaur disguise. Now, why is this important? Evolutionists want to protect their evolutionary stack of cards from falling. And this is a picture of the dinosaur bone that I want to talk about, two sides of it. It's a Hadrosaur bone, and that's a picture of a Hadrosaur down below. And you can actually see a professor from the University of Pennsylvania holding that bone in his hand. Creationists have tested for carbon-14 and have found carbon-14. There's also carbon-12. But carbon-14 is remaining in dinosaur bones. Rather than admit that this is a huge problem for them, some evolutionists will jump on the sample contamination bandwagon. For they know, quotes around it, in their minds, that zero carbon-14 should be remaining in dinosaur bones. And it is one of their supreme facts, or statements of faith, that dinosaurs died out millions of years ago. Thus, if exposed, this would be an extreme embarrassment. Carbon-14 is not good for testing anything much beyond 50,000 years, or even 100,000 maybe, but let's continue. But why might an evolutionist do this? They might be forced to admit that carbon-14 still remains in dinosaur bones. Remember I said that it can measure anything less than 50,000 years. And that they would also have to admit that dinosaurs are not millions of years old and that the Bible was right all along relative to creation chronology. In other words, evolution would not have a chronological leg to stand on. Evolution should collapse. It would be impossible. Why would it collapse? It would be impossible for evolution to work if it only had 6,000 years to change from primordial soup to man. That's a picture of me down there on the right, and I'll talk about that video in a little bit. First, I reveal in this particular video that you're watching my failed efforts to get dinosaur carbon tested for carbon-14 presence. This spans the years from 2003 to 2016 and includes questions I have asked Dr. Mary Schweitzer. She is the famous scientist who showed that some dinosaur bones actually have, after the removal of minerals, soft and flexible tissue. Second, I reveal recent and even more concerted efforts on my part to get my dinosaur bone tested. This involved a meeting with a University of Pennsylvania professor of paleontology and eventually sending in 3 grams to the University of Georgia for AMS testing. Third, I reveal my efforts to interact with various others, both nationally and internationally, and also share my less than 5-minute commentary about this from an almost 4-hour-long interview debate I had against 3 evolutionists. And that's up on YouTube, and there's a picture, a screenshot of that interview debate. I also hope to share, near the end of this, a brief video of the University of Pennsylvania professor holding my dinosaur bone in my backyard on July 20, 2016. Now, way back in November 20, 2003, a long time ago, I was involved in a videotape debate with Dr. Brian Richmond of George Washington University's Anthropology Department. There he is on the right side. After individual presentations, we sat as panelists responding to questions from the audience. During the video recorded discussion, Dr. Richmond explained that there would no longer be any carbon or bone in dinosaur fossils. Rock minerals would have replaced all the original bone. He was giving the evolutionary party line, but subsequently was proved wrong by Dr. Mary Schweitzer. I said at the time that dinosaur bones had been found with collagen still remaining. About 2 years later, it was revealed that a Tyrannosaurus rex femur had been studied by Dr. Mary Schweitzer. There's a picture of her. She of North Carolina State University. On June 30, 2005, I wrote to her, referring to my exchange with Dr. Richmond. She graciously responded the same day, writing as follows: "The definition of fossilization needs a bit refining for your friend, and a lot of redefinition now on everyone's part, since our current theories do not account for soft tissue and cellular preservation. Some dino bone is quite high in carbon. For example, I have spent most of my career arguing that small epitopes," and she explains what it is there, but she went on and said, "Never in my wildest dreams would I have predicted what we found." Now, please do not misunderstand. Dr. Schweitzer remained an evolutionist, but in an interview with Emily Ruppel, she admitted, so that leaves us with two alternatives for interpretation. Either the dinosaurs aren't as old as we think they are, or maybe we don't know exactly how these things get preserved, and the reference is given. On March 25th, following Dr. Schweitzer's revelations, I sent these words to Dr. Richmond: "Maybe the dinosaur samples are not as old as evolution assumes. Comment?" He responded, "When I came to work this morning, the Earth looked flat. Comment?" In other words, he was saying that the Earth may seem to be flat and dinosaur bones may seem to be young, but neither "seem" is true. On two different occasions in 2005, I asked Dr. Schweitzer if she had dated the dinosaur carbon from dinosaur bones. For example, on June 30, I said, "You wrote some dino bone is quite high in carbon, for example. Have you ever tested for C14? My guess is that you would find residual C14 much beyond the allowable amount given the supposed great antiquity of dinosaurs." Although I received a previous email communication and another somewhat later from Dr. Schweitzer, I never received a response to that particular question. Now let's jump ahead 11 years. I received another email from Dr. Schweitzer, September of this year, 2016, but she would prefer that I not reveal what she wrote. But here is how I responded on the same day to her. "Dear Dr. Schweitzer, you had not responded to my earlier question of about 11 years ago related to testing the carbon you found in dino bones to see if there was any remaining C14. It is hard for me to believe that old Earth scientists would not do that if for no other reason than to silence young Earth people who believe the bones are much younger, that there would be remaining C14 in them. So again, I ask, have you tested your dino-carbon for C14? If you have, where were the results published? If you have not, please do. I realize that the lab might say that it would be a waste of time and money. You could respond, well, it would not be a waste of time because young Earth scientists believe there should be remaining C14 in the carbon. In other words, let's prove them wrong. Let's do the AMS testing and publish the results. You could even add, in response to any objection that it would be a waste of valuable funds, that you know someone in Philadelphia who would be willing to pay the $500 fee. You mentioned doing research on a Hadrosaur bone. I'll send you one and you can keep half if on your half you would be willing to chip off a piece and submit it for AMS testing." And again, that's the bone that I would have sent. It was the case, as was the case 11 years prior, I have received no response from Dr. Schweitzer on this point. I am not saying she herself would not be unwilling to do the test, but she is an employee and probably wants to retain her job. The following month, October 22 this year, 2016, I wrote to her again asking if she would be willing to assist the UPenn professor by submitting a portion of my bone for AMS testing. I added, please also resist the estimated age question, for that is the very point of the test. Is the system rigged against anyone who wants a C14-C12 ratio for dino-carbon? Saying something like, we refuse to test dino bone for C14 as it would be a waste of time, etc. Why should a dino bone automatically be calibrated upwards by millions of years just because they know, quote unquote, dino bone is millions of years old? Why not prove people like me wrong by finding 0 C14 in the dino bone? On the form that I filled out and submitted to Atlanta, Georgia, there was an explicit question, what is essentially your estimated age of the sample? But isn't that their job to determine the age? Why ask us, or the submitter, to give an estimated age? There has been no response to this email either. Maybe she does not want a repeat of the experience she had after finding soft, flexible dinosaur tissue. In the interview referred to above, Dr. Schweitzer reported, quote, still, it's not surprising they've reacted this way. The bone that I first studied I got from Jack, and when I gave him our initial results that he was rather angry. I called him a few times. By my third call he said, blank, Mary, the creationists are just going to love you. But I said, this is just what the data say. I'm not making it up. The Jack she refers to there is Jack Horner, and he is one of the best known paleontologists in the world. But shouldn't he be a level-headed scientist willing to go where the data leads? As a matter of fact, all humans, including evolutionary paleontologists and myself, have a religious or an anti-religious bias or axe to grind. Here's a copy of the check that I sent and was returned. On July 20, I met with a University of Pennsylvania professor of paleontology. He was quite friendly, and we had lunch together in my backyard. I had written to him on June 22nd. He responded, Paul, I was thinking that $600 was the right ballpark for the cost. Are you willing to pay this amount? I would be willing to submit the sample. Fair is fair. I would check with the University of Georgia to see what their fee structure and policy might be, and I do that on the next slide, I think. It was revealed later that in this video that the University of Georgia was indeed eventually contacted and even did receive both my sample and check, but they returned the sample untested and the check unused. And this person, Dr. Cherkinsky of the Center for Applied Isotope Studies at the University of Georgia, he estimated that if we could send 3 to 5 grams in, the price would be $500. Some time lapsed, vacations, etc., but then I received these words from the professor on September 26. As you correctly infer, I am deeply conflicted about doing what I promised I would do. The proposal is to test a dinosaur sample for C14 dating. The problem is that what we did not resolve is how to avoid dishonesty in analyzing the specimen. I wasn't suggesting being dishonest. So he explains it here. It says, if we tell the laboratory, which we didn't want to do, it is a dinosaur, they will probably refuse to test it. If we tell them that it is an Ice Age mammal, they will derive a date in the range that you suggest after you suggest it, or rather, after I suggest it. It really isn't very satisfactory, and I agree with him. I attempted through a student to determine if the University Museum still does C14, and he didn't get back to him. So, and I checked later, and they don't do it. But I did contact Dr. Philip Jones of the University Museum. But before I get to that second paragraph, let me finish off here. I responded on the same day. I agree about the honesty matter, but I'm not sure the AMS testers are being honest. They seem to be saying essentially, tell me how old the bone is, and we'll get a figure in the ballpark. We just wanted the AMS result. Is there C14 in the bone? It is a simple yes or no. So as mentioned, I contacted Philip Jones, a very friendly man that I had met and had lunch with relative to another issue. And he wrote on October 3rd, "Dear Paul, great to hear from you again, and I hope you are doing well. Unfortunately, bones are beyond my competence. However, we have a top-of-the-line physical anthropology section at the museum who can be contacted." And this is the person on the right that I contacted. Her name is Dr. Janet Monge. And she wrote in November of this year, 2016, "I received these words from her. No, Paul, Penn went out of the radiocarbon business about 30 years ago. So sad." And this on the lower left is the letter that I received from the University of Georgia, the AMS testers. I had sent them $500 and part of the bone and so on. And Dr. Robert Spiegman, pictured there, director of the Center for Applied Isotope Studies at the university, he wrote, "I am afraid I must inform you that we are unable to analyze the material you submitted for radiocarbon dating. The reason given is that they are unable to provide service to private individuals." Now there are three people here. I won't read all of this, but the one person is a doctor from Hungarian Academy of Science. The lab works with mass spectrometry. And I explained the situation, and I received no response from him. I do not have him pictured. On the same day, I wrote to another person, PhD, at the Accelerator Mass Spectrometry Facility there in Miami, Florida. Again, there was no response. And then I sent an email to Jason Giacomo, PhD Director of AMS Unit in Seattle, Washington, but again, there was no response. But I did get a response from Dr. Zhongyi Zhu, Director of Institute of Vertebrate Paleontology, Chinese Academy of Science in Beijing, China. It was dated October 30. He wrote, "Dear Mr. Humber, thanks for this letter. Unfortunately, our institute does not have the machine and technology to carbon date fossils. Sorry to be negative on this. Best wishes." And he signed his name or wrote his name. There is, however, a fabulous and scholarly 2015 Creation Research Society Quarterly, which I had given to the University of Pennsylvania professor on July 20. And this is what he wrote back about 8 days later. "I did look over the Dinosaur book. It is quite impressive. It demonstrates far more sophistication than previously characterized publications of the CRQ. This does not mean that I endorse the findings. I am not competent to judge, but I am impressed." Now, what does that article say? Well, in the abstract on page 299, it says, "We report detectable amounts of radiocarbon in all 16 of our samples." And then they actually tried to falsify. "Attempts to falsify our hypothesis failed, including comparison of our data with previously published carbon-dated fossils. We conclude that the fossils and other carboniferous materials found throughout the Phanerozoic strata contain measurable amounts of radiocarbon that is most probably endogenous, in other words, part of the original material." On page 307 it says, we can read these words, "Our 16 dinosaur and other fossil carbon dates mingled with already published AMS carbon dates for fossils plus various other things like coal and so on. These 43 results lie within a range of approximately 17,000 to 53,000, well within the ability of the AMS capabilities. Accelerated mass spectrometer is what that means. As discoveries of radiocarbon in fossil material increase, arguments of contamination become less plausible. Indeed, if these carbon dates are illegitimate, then the whole carbon dating industry would be held suspect. Now, this is a chart from that journal, and it's very impressive. I'm not going to read this. Notice how I highlight a number of Hadrosaur fossils, and there are other dinosaurs in there. And notice that in the first column, or the second column, all of the dates are less than 50,000 years. And dinosaurs are supposedly 65 million years old. So this is not even 1 million, let alone 65 million years old. This is from the conclusion on page 309. On the basis of repeated observations of original tissues found in dinosaur and other bones, and on the basis of prior researchers' difficulties in finding a reliable source of carbon dead Earth material to calibrate highly sensitive AMS systems, we tested 16 fossil samples for the presence of C14. Our fossils came from 7 dinosaurs, including 2 dates from the iDino projects, Triceratops and so on, and various other things, and it, I believe, continues on the next page. We sought, in other words, to falsify, and there's the picture of the front cover of that journal. We sought to falsify the hypothesis that this radiocarbon originated from our fossil material first by comparing our amounts of measured radiocarbon to those already published, finding general concordance between our data and already published data. Second, all samples, regardless of geographic and even stratigraphic provenance, show detectable C14 within a total age range spanning orders of magnitude smaller than the conventional age range for these fossils. In addition, some of our fossil material was not extracted from at as great a depth. Well, I'm going to skip that. That's significant, but let me go down. Third, 5 different laboratories all detected radiocarbon in fossils from locations worldwide, arguing against contamination by poor lab practice or by any local anomaly. These observations are not consistent with contamination. Now, I hope that I'm going to be able to attach the 2 videos to this one, and if I fail in that, please forgive me. The one, as I reported, was a segment, 5-minute segment, less than that, of a 4-hour debate and so on. The other one is with the University of Pennsylvania professor in my backyard. Now here's a concluding prayer, and feel free to join me. Creator Christ, you made all the dinosaurs about 6,000 years ago, and also everything else. The devil is crafty, and many people are confused about dinosaurs, but dinosaurs are your awesome creations. If it please you, use this feeble video to touch the hearts of many for their good, your praise, and the Father's glory. Your apostle said that the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but divinely powerful for the destruction of fortresses. Please bring the evolutionary fortress down. You want us to take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. Lord, may many people reject the ungodly chronology of secularism and believe your Bible. Lord, the same apostle elsewhere commanded by the Spirit, do not participate in the unfruitful deeds of darkness, but instead even expose them. And that's what I'm trying to do in this video. Lord, help your people to expose false doctrine. Thank you for coming to earth and for going to that cross for us. We praise the Father for raising you from death and giving you the name that is above every name. Most Holy Father, most beloved Son, and most Holy Spirit, be exalted in our hearts. May we all worship you, the triune God. Amen.
Discrepancies. So I'm going to ask you first, why do you think there was discrepancies to the carbon-14 dating? Why do you want it done? And then I'm going to ask General that same question.
Well, I'm not aware of discrepancies on the young Earth perspective, testing dinosaur bone for carbon-14, I mean, all of them are in the thousands of years as opposed to the millions of years. Now, I've got here, and if you want to put the camera, I don't know, I don't see myself.
It's showing you.
Maybe, oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes it switches away. This is a Hadrosaur Vertebra that I have. It's one of, I have two of them. The other one that I have is larger. And I actually sent approximately 3 grams of that bone to University of Georgia to be AMS tested. I had originally talked with the professor at the University of Pennsylvania, which is in Philadelphia. He came to my backyard. He held that bone. He agreed that it was a hadrosaur, or certainly a dinosaur bone. And he was interested in facilitating our jointly sending it in for testing. But what happened is initially he was affirmative, but it seems to me, and I'm guessing here, that it's perhaps a little bit of pressure that he received not to test the bone for carbon-14. And so he brought it back to me, and we have a friendly relationship, and that's one of the reasons I'm not mentioning his name, but he's definitely in the field of paleontology and so on. And he was sympathetic. He would be something like Han, I guess, an old Earth creationist. But he saw my point being that if there is carbon-14 in dinosaur bone, then that throws a huge monkey wrench into the whole chronology, because evolutionists are committed to 65 million years, give or take, whatever. But there should be no carbon-14 in a bone, a dinosaur bone. Zero, it should essentially be zero, even after 100,000 years, or let's say 200. Let's be generous. But certainly, the AMS testing should be able to produce some carbon-14 in a bone that, the reading, if it gives a reading of, let's say, 50,000 years, that's well within the parameters of the AMS testing. And you mentioned Hugh Miller and Carl Ball and so on. I'm not sure too much about what Carl Ball has to do, but I am familiar with Hugh Miller. And his readings are in the 20,000 or 30,000, not anywhere near. So when I sent a portion to University of Georgia to have them tested, they just sent it back. I sent in a check, $500 check. That's what the person had said, that's what it would cost. And they returned the check and the bone, and they say, we don't do this for individuals. So if there is an interest in closing down arguments from creationists, that's not the way to do it. Test the bone, come up with 0 carbon-14 and say, we told you so, but you're out $500 to prove a ridiculous thing. The point is that the creationists who are willing to test for carbon-14 in dinosaur bone have tested, and they consistently get readings in the thousands of years as opposed to millions.
Okay, let me.
Peter Dodson had lunch with me. You can see the various things on the table here, and he's holding vertebra, and he's going to remove the piece of it that we're planning on sending in for AMS testing. So you can see the piece that he just took off, and this is what we believe is a immature dinosaur vertebra bone. But we want to send it in and see what the AMS result is. Okay.